Meaning that if we
The House Select Committee on Assassinations agreed with the Warren Commission that Oswald killed the president and wounded Governor Connally. But they added there was a second gunman who fired and missed.
For the sounds picked up at this microphone of shots fired from here, the first two.
The second gunman conclusion was based in part on acoustic evidence, which remains controversial. So even though both government investigations agreed about Oswald, the issue of a conspiracy was never laid to rest. Even today, critics continue to question whether the physical evidence involving the rifle and bullets supports the lone assassin conclusion. That conclusion is known as the single bullet theory. This is Dealey Plaza, the scene of the crime. Nova has had this computer model of Dealey Plaza built to accurate scale to help our investigation. Here is the school book depository building. Here, the grassy knoll where a second gunman may have been concealed. The motorcade route took Kennedy's limousine down Houston Street and then with a sharp left onto Elm Street. The Warren Commission initially assumed the first bullet wounded the president in the neck, the second wounded the governor, and the third struck Kennedy in the head and killed him. This was partly based on Governor Connally's eyewitness account.
As soon as he was able, Governor Connally appeared on nationwide television to give the most lucid account so far of the tragic events.
We had just turned the corner. We heard a shot. I turned and looked in the back seat. The president had slumped. He had said nothing. Almost simultaneously, as I turned, I was hit. And I knew I'd been hit badly. And,
if Connally was correct that he and Kennedy were hit by separate shots, this created a timing problem.
The president was hit again.
Josiah Thompson analyzed this problem in his book 6 Seconds in Dallas, considered one of the most perceptive analyses of the assassination. As a private investigator, Thompson has worked on over 100 murder cases. He helped examine Kennedy's murder for Life magazine. Some of his arguments are based on FBI test results.
Well, here's the problem. The mechanical firing time of the rifle, as tested by Frazier of the FBI. By mechanical firing time, we mean just this. Boom, working the bolt, and pulling the trigger again. The necessary minimum mechanical firing time was 2.3 seconds. If you add on to that realistic additions, such as reacquiring the target in the scope, and secondly, zeroing in the crosshairs to permit accurate shooting, you're now no longer at 2.3 seconds, you're up at 3 or 4 seconds between shots on this rifle. But just given the Zapruder film, wasn't enough time for this rifle to get off 2 shots in that time interval.
Abraham Zapruder was standing here on the grassy knoll when he took the most famous pictures of the assassination with his 8mm home movie camera. The camera ran at 18 frames per second, so every frame is a snapshot of the event, an 1/18 of a second apart. After closely analyzing his film, the Warren Commission then decided Oswald's first shot had missed, and his second shot struck both men. This was their solution to the timing problem, and it became known as the single bullet theory. Josiah Thompson argues that the Zapruder film also shows the theory is wrong.
This is frame 207. Now, between this frame and frame 222, when the car emerges from the sign, the Warren Commission believes that Kennedy and Connally were both hit by the single bullet. At this point, we see no indication of any hit. This is now frame 222. Connally is emerging from behind the sign, looks apparently composed, unhit. We now have frame 225. For the first time, we can see that John Kennedy has clearly been hit. Connally sitting in front of him, looking to his right. This is frame 230. Kennedy's clearly been hit. His elbows are splayed upwards. Connally sitting composed in front of him, holding his Stetson, looking calm. According to the Warren Commission, Connally's been hit by a bullet that blew 5 inches out of his 5th rib and shattered his wrist at this point. Moving ahead now to frame 236, Kennedy is obviously reacting. Connally is turning, his mouth open in what may be "oh no, no," which he said he was saying when he was hit. 2:37 now. Connally continuing his turn, and now in the next 18th of a second, enormous changes. Connally's shoulder's been driven down, his hair has been displaced, and his cheeks are puffed. This is frame 238. In fact, what we are watching is a snapshot taken just before and just after the impact of the bullet, driving into Connally's shoulder, compressing his lung, hence puffing his cheeks. If that's what we're seeing, then it's quite clear Kennedy was hit significantly earlier, and the single bullet theory is wrong.
But a congressional panel looked at the Zapruder film and concluded that Connally simply reacted to the shot later than Kennedy. The panel was headed by forensic pathologist Dr. Michael Baden.
In the Zapruder film, there appears to be a delayed reaction in Governor Connally responding to injury. However, people often respond in delayed fashion to gunshot wounds. There isn't an instantaneous response.
Despite his first account of what happened, Governor Connally later testified that he had not seen Kennedy wounded by the first shot. Congress determined that Connally turned here in response to hearing that first shot. But the shot missed. Both men were then wounded by the single bullet 3 seconds later when they were hidden by the sign. 3 seconds between shots was enough time for a gunman to fire twice. So as far as timing is concerned, although it cannot be ruled out that the first bullet struck Kennedy and the second, shot by another gunman, hit Connally, it is plausible to conclude both men were wounded by a single bullet. Darrow Tomlinson, a Parkland Hospital employee, reenacts how he found that bullet on a stretcher. The bullet was ballistically traced to Oswald's rifle. The Warren Commission concluded that it was the bullet that had wounded both men and that it had fallen out of Connally's clothing onto his hospital stretcher.
The bullet was found here in this area, and not on that stretcher. That's the stretcher I took off the elevator.
The stretcher he took off the elevator was Connally's, so Tomlinson found the bullet on a different stretcher not connected to the case. This led critics to claim the bullet was planted, but the commission decided Tomlinson was mistaken.
It was there when I came up.
This is the bullet. Could it look like this after it went through Kennedy's neck and then struck the governor? The surgeon who operated on Governor Connally's chest wounds at Parkland Hospital was Dr. Robert Shaw.
The bullet struck lateral to the shoulder blade, stripped out approximately 10 centimeters of the fifth rib, driving fragments of the rib into his chest, went on and struck the radius bone of his lower arm at this point, and a small fragment of bullet entered the inner aspect of the lower left thigh. I have never seen a bullet that had caused as much bony damage as you found in the case of Governor Connally remain as a pristine bullet.
At the National Archives in Washington, Dr. Cyril Wecht, former head of the American Academy of Forensic Sciences, examined bullets the Warren Commission had test-fired. To find out if a bullet could break so many bones and remain apparently intact, the commission used a rifle similar to Oswald's.
And then they got these bullets, all 6.5 millimeter. And they test-fired, first into cotton wadding. These two bullets were fired into cotton wadding, striking nothing. You will note that these bullets both have a minimal degree of protrusion of the lead at the base. Otherwise, they are intact, which is what you would expect. The next bullet broke one rib of a goat carcass. Notice, please, it's widening. This bullet struck one of the two large bones that come down from the elbow to the wrist in a human cadaver. They wanted to simulate the fracture of that same bone in Governor Connally. Please note the substantial deformity. This is classical, typical, when a bullet strikes a dense, heavy bone or some other very firm object. Now, I want you to look at the so-called stretcher bullet. This bullet is the actual bullet that the Warren Commission claims broke both John Connolly's right fifth rib, destroying 4 inches of that bone, pulverizing it, and which caused a comminuted or extensively fragmented fracture of a dense, heavy bone down near the base of the wrist, and emerged in this condition. You will see that it is near pristine. As a matter of fact, its nose, the cone, the sides of the bullet are completely intact and unscathed. It has only minimal protrusion of the lead core at the base, in the same fashion that the 2 bullets did that had been fired into test wadding. That's from the impact of the firing mechanism.